Oppenheimer is brought to us by Christopher Nolan, both writer and director of this movie, starring Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Josh Hartnett, Robert Downey Jr., and a slew of people that's going to be impossible to list off. It's the story of Robert Oppenheimer, the man behind the atomic bomb, and how he creates the atomic bomb and dealing with the ramifications of its use to end the Second World War. I know a lot of people have seen it by now, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about the movie because I want you to experience this for yourself if you haven't already. But let me tell you, this movie, I'm just going to get right into it. It is a work of art. Coming from Chris Nolan, that's probably not a big surprise, but this might be his best movie in years. Probably since Inception. That being said, one could make an argument for Dunkirk. I gotta be honest though, I haven't seen movies of his like Memento and Insomnia and The Following from 1997. I've never had the chance to get around to it, but one day I will though. As far as all the ones I've seen from him, from Batman Begins onward, I still think that he has yet to make a bad movie. Some of you may disagree with me, and that's totally fine. If there's somebody in Hollywood that's never struck out, it's Nolan. As others have pointed out, one of the few filmmakers in the industry that can draw in a big audience by creating these very unique blockbusters or big event types of movies that aren't necessarily connected to a certain franchise or IP. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but for someone like Chris Nolan to have this much clout, we need some stuff like this, alongside the other big franchises too. This movie from start to finish never ever lets up. It moves at a really brisk pace without feeling like it's moving too quickly that you don't have enough time to absorb what's going on. Every single character in this movie has their part to play. From the main attractions in Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr., or some of the scientists and some of the military officials like Matt Damon's character, who's a general in the US Army, helping him with the Manhattan Project. Every single person in this movie gets their moment to shine without it feeling too cluttered or too overloaded. To my knowledge anyway, this might be the first movie that Chris Nolan has written and directed at the same time. I believe other projects he did in the past, he might have been a co-writer. Very happy to report though, the script is airtight. No loose ends or dull moments whatsoever. There are a couple moments throughout the movie that give you somewhat of a brief moment to slow down and breathe, but then almost instantly it picks back up. The cinematographer, Hoyte van Hoytema, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, has pristine, beautiful images throughout this whole thing, in particular when the eventual bomb is blown up. We all know that's going to happen since this is the Manhattan Project, and we know that they have to eventually test the explosion. But when that moment happens, the theater that I saw this in was dead silent. Everybody was in shock by just how gorgeous that image was. Among other things too that are used in this movie to illustrate the atoms and neutrons and protons and whatever type of science is added into making the atomic bomb. I'm not a scientist, so don't take what I say seriously, but I do appreciate those little creative choices in order to illustrate what exactly goes on in an atom and what kind of energy a nuclear bomb or the atomic bomb really entails when it eventually blows up. Not to mention the score by Ludwig Göransson, who returns after his collaboration with Nolan from Tenet. Kind of makes me miss Hans Zimmer's music though, but still, Göransson is a worthy successor. This is probably the best work I've ever seen from Cillian Murphy. He's able to remain really calm, but show the emotions at the appropriate times. And the film wisely shows you just how much of a weight on his shoulders that he's carrying when he realizes how much power and destruction that the bomb eventually will cause. There's certain scenes where he's questioned by the United States government. I mean, if you've seen in the trailers, it's really no surprise that he ends up being interrogated by the government because of certain things that he has connections with. If you don't know the history of Robert Oppenheimer, I won't give anything away. He gets grilled by certain government officials, and he starts to realize the weight of what he's done, leading to certain sound effects that play out throughout these scenes, which actually drown out some of the dialogue. And this is something that Nolan has been doing for his last several movies, and other people have mentioned this too. Sometimes in movies like Tenet, it's a little bit obnoxious and makes me want to turn on the subtitles. In this case though, I think it was done with skill because it's meant to show you just how big of an implication the atomic bomb really is. We actually get to see conversations with him and Albert Einstein, who was played by the prisoner from Dark Knight Rises who helps Bruce Wayne heal from his back injury in the prison. It's protruding on your back. Stand like this until you stand. His wife in the movie, played by Emily Blunt, also plays her part just fine, and the film doesn't really play up the fact that she's Emily Blunt in a Chris Nolan movie. There's certain moments where she's sitting in the background, waiting for the right moment to come in when the questions start going to her. And other people like Josh Hartnett are actually a welcome sight, since he might have done some things in the last 20 years between early 2000s and now, but to see him in actually something really serious, I kind of like that. And Florence Pugh is in here in a very limited part, plays Oppenheimer's first love, so to speak, that we know of anyway, or at least that I know of. But it's done very effectively, and it shows you just how emotionally scarred Oppenheimer was during his time making this bomb. Now, I don't know the life story of Oppenheimer. I never really took the time to look into it, but if what happened in real life is anything like what we see in this movie, it really got me, especially when we see how it wraps up. Still such a poser, though. I cannot look at Florence Pugh and not think of that line from Black Widow. I will never, ever be able to unhear that. But let's talk about another big actor in here. Robert Downey Jr. as one senator, or I don't know if he's a senator or not. I can't remember the character's name, but this is probably the best that he's been in a long time. Now, I love the guy as Iron Man, and I always will. And he's really likable in anything else that he's in. But to see him play a character that has certain little things that happen without being too specific, and how he's dealing with Robert Oppenheimer, and when certain things are revealed towards the end of the movie, it kind of threw me for a loop. I was not expecting that. A huge part of it is the writing and direction from Chris Nolan. But when you pair Nolan with somebody like Robert Downey Jr., it's going to be electric. And that's exactly how Downey comes off here. And of course, the best line in the movie, which thankfully is just as good in the actual film as well as the trailers.
Chances are near zero. Near zero. What do you want from theory alone? Zero would be nice.
My thoughts exactly. This movie is also 3 hours long, but it doesn't really feel like 3 hours, although I think in a way it does, but the momentum this movie has, similar to The Dark Knight, where it just keeps going and going, I think in some ways this movie is even faster than Dark Knight. The pacing is just relentless. All that being said though, I'm gonna have to watch this multiple times in order to fully grasp everything, because there was a few times that I actually had to lean in and say, wait, did something relevant happen? What's going on? And some of that is due to the dialogue being tuned out by the sound, which is kind of obnoxious, but at the same time, it kind of works in this movie too. I mean, if anything to pick apart with this movie, it's probably that. I wish that Nolan would kind of dial back on that. I don't really see him going overboard with it like some other directors might do. Still, if you're aware of those things, it's noticeable. An interesting thing to note, right after the test is successful, the third act consists of mostly the conclusion of the Senate hearings, or government hearings, if you will, where we get to see certain things resolved or answered that we didn't understand earlier on in the movie. Again, I'm trying to be light on some of the details, but I was wondering after the test was over, how much further do we have to go here? I wasn't tapping out or anything, I was kind of wondering, okay, I hope this movie doesn't overstay its welcome. Thankfully it doesn't though. And the final scene and image, without being too specific, floored me. And I sat there for a good 30 seconds somewhat taken aback. Only Chris Nolan could have that kind of effect on you. At the end of the day, Oppenheimer is yet another home run for Christopher Nolan. Probably the best biopic I have seen in quite a long time. Probably since Walk the Line by James Mangold. There's some good biopics out there, some that I like better than others, like Bohemian Rhapsody, which by the way, Rami Malek is in here too, in a very small part, but a crucial one. But I really wish that more biopics were like this. Gives you just enough of the emotional punch that you really need. Put that in the hands of Chris Nolan, you're gonna get quality entertainment. There's no doubt about that. Don't want to overhype or overrate this, but this, I think, in some ways, is a work of art. And I guarantee you that film schools or any film studies classes out there are going to be showing scenes from this movie for years to come. Would I put this in the top tier of Chris Nolan's filmography? I still think Nolan is yet to make a bad movie, but if anything, I would probably say yeah. This, along with Inception and Dark Knight, we just might have a holy trinity on our hands here. Also, if you're wondering whether or not I'm going to see the Barbie movie since they both came out in the same weekend, probably not. Might catch it on streaming. It's not really something I'm interested in. If some of you have seen it and like it, hey, more power to you. I don't want to get too deep into that. Other people have talked about it to death by now. There's no need to add to the conversation. I gotta say real quick, there was a guy in front of me. When I was in line to go see this, he was dressed up as a Ken doll in a box. That is probably the best use of cosplay I've ever laid eyes on. Barbenheimer has struck hard. Those are my thoughts on Oppenheimer. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are if you've seen this movie. And as always, see you in the next one.